Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Breaking the Lens of Bias. My name is Kat Killian. Glad to be with you here today. Before we get started on today's topic, I just want to make an update on last week's topic. The marriage equality bill was passed by the House and is now going to President Biden to sign. And in my opinion, I think that's a good thing. For marriage equality across the board for anyone regarding in same-sex or biracial or multiracial marriages. So I'm just glad to report on that, and I hope you all see that and just remember what we talked about last week. Anyway, today I'm here to talk about what is an oath, and this comes to mind because of what has happened last week from our former president, basically stating on his network Truth Social. I won't read the whole post. I forget what they call them on there. But he said massive fraud of this type, and he's referring to his debunked alleging of the 2020 election being fraudulent, allows for the magnitude or the massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. And that's just pretty amazing to me. Anybody who takes a public office, our military, and people who come to this country and become citizens, they're not natural born citizens, have to take an oath, either the oath of office or the oath to gain citizenship. And the same for the armed forces, to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And that to me, it doesn't surprise me that our former president said that, because he's been grousing for 2 years about the election and what he believes, although has been unable to prove it. And so what actually bothers me more than that is the lack of response from our legislators regarding that. And unfortunately, it's many of the Republican legislators, almost all of them, have kept silent on that. And they too take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. And so that being said, why perhaps are they silent? To me, an oath is this in a sense sacrosanct, that you would say, I'm going to uphold the Constitution. And what does that mean? And I would like to think, as a law-abiding American, that I would do that, and I support the Constitution, and I support the rights and the liberties that we have in this Constitution, in order to live our lives. It's held with modifications for well over 200 years, almost 250 years now. And, well, not quite 250, but regardless, the idea that our people who have positions of power in leadership, who are our representatives, would not stand up and say, we don't believe this. And the question is, why wouldn't they do that? And basically, it could be for a number of reasons. There are several biases that are there. One I think probably is the most relevant, in my opinion, is what we call the sunk cost fallacy. That they're irrationally clinging to things that have already cost something. And maybe it's not totally irrational, maybe it is rational. Ideally, when people want to hold positions of power, they will, uh, they say, there's this phrase that says, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So when you want to have power, there is a certain amount of corruption involved in order to maintain that power. So it would make sense that even if it's not necessarily a conscious choice, which I think it is in a lot of cases, that they would not uphold that oath or not state that they would uphold that oath um, to the public because they have too much sunk into keeping their power. Um, as you all know, the Republicans gained a slim majority in the House. They did not reclaim the Senate, but that means there is a split Congress, and the priorities of the Biden administration are not going to get done. Um, and what that means, and how it's going to play out. So, in looking at what's an oath, I would ask everyone if that is a requirement of office, that you uphold the Constitution of the United States of America, or if you're holding a state office, the state that you reside in. Um, what would it mean if your representatives, your president, your governor, uh, your other high office holders, said that I'm not going to do that? What would that mean to you? And what would you ask them? Uh, or are you clinging to a fallacy? Well, it's more important that they do this, so I'm willing to give up that. Um, and that's been the case of many political decisions made by people of both parties. Um, and I think that's the purpose of the oath. It's in order to get people to remember the reason why we have created this government, why we have gone back, and why we have these elections every year, and why there are processes, and why there is a balance of power in our democracy. And the it all starts with the oath, to me. If that is first and foremost in anybody's mind, um, people will look towards who is upholding the Constitution, who is making decisions based upon what the Constitution says, and not an isolated clause here or an isolated clause there, but an overall the spirit of the Constitution. And in that light, just to bring in some background and some history, um, one of the things that's kind of interesting that was said about this is Kevin McCarthy, the presumed next Speaker of the House, has said, on the very first day of the new Republican-led Congress, we will read every single word of the Constitution aloud from the floor of the House, something that hasn't been done in years. And interestingly enough, when people say years, the implication is, oh my gosh, it's been a long time. And I do have some actually information here that does say when it was last done. Uh, it does say, in fact, that the Republicans demanded a reading of the Constitution for the first time in its history in 2011. But interestingly enough, they cut out the parts that the framers wrote that have been amended since the document was written. The famous 3/5 clause, that counting enslaved African Americans as 3/5 of a white person for the purpose of representation, hence giving a greater representation of eligible voting population to states uh, who had lower white voting populations. Um, and then, of course, there were accusations of them cherry picking, which is fair. And then since then, the House has read the Constitution at least twice more in 2015 and 2017. And it's been mainly by the Republicans, stating that they are standing on the Constitution while the Democrats are abusing of it. And so this is so interesting in the light of the presumed leader of the Republican Party stating that the Constitution rules should be suspended in order to overthrow the election. And so whether or not the Constitution is read in Congress, and I personally think it's a great idea that it be read by every American, including its amendments. And I would also suggest that everyone read the Federalist Papers, which give you a good idea of some of the debates and the ideas behind the meaning of the Constitution and the reasoning for the way things were written, and give some understanding as to the intent of that. So, with that all being said, what I would ask you is, if you support former President Trump's position that the Constitution should be suspended or ignored in order to overturn the 2020 election, I would suggest that you look carefully at what does an oath mean, and what does it mean to swear an oath in our country, and what does it mean to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And read the Constitution itself, read the amendments to the Constitution, starting with the Bill of Rights, read the Federalist Papers, and become a little bit more educated on that. Oftentimes our biases are based in things that we don't know, or maybe sometimes we know too much and we're not willing to be open-minded to that. So I'm hoping today will give you some more insight into the thoughts behind that, whether or not you want to hold your representatives accountable to the Constitution or to a particular party and its presumed leader of that party. So today I'm just going to say it. God bless America. And I hope to see you next week for another episode of Breaking the Lens of Bias. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.